All right, welcome back to another riveting episode of Mad Times with Madison. It is extremely possible that you just listened to this episode if you're a subscriber and you're coming right to part 2, which is going to feel the most natural to me because I just pushed stop record and then started recording immediately after that because I'm recording these back to back, obviously, so you can have them at the same time. If you are not a subscriber, I will remind you, this is part 2 of the Amanda Knox case. The murder of Meredith Kircher was the basis of part 1. Part 2 is going to be the trial of Amanda and Raffaele Sollecito. It's just insane. There's nothing I can preface about whatever happened last week and what is about to happen now. It was just like an extremely unfortunate set of circumstances for everyone involved. It's just insanity. So if you didn't listen to part 1, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you would like some context, feel free to go back and listen to that. If not, we're going to jump right into the trial after Amanda, Raffaele, and Patrik Lumumba were arrested for the murder of Meredith Kircher, which the police have led themselves to believe happened as a sex game gone wrong. And if you're thinking that sounds kind of random, why would they think of that? We are about to get into the terrible things they had said about Amanda that led them to believe this themselves. And I'll get into it actually. I'm not going to preface it now. So Amanda, we left off with Amanda's note after she was arrested saying she has nothing but lies to be afraid of. So, because she knows that she didn't kill Meredith. So at the very least, all she has to be scared of are some lies. I left it off by saying she should be very afraid because I don't think she was prepared for exactly how terrible they were willing to make her life to get what they wanted. So, here we go. The police put out all these statements and gave transcripts to Nick Pisa, who I mentioned in part 1, who is like my personal enemy. He's just a shitbag. If you watch the documentary, he's in it. He's like very smug, very arrogant, very dumb. So the police are putting out all these statements and giving transcripts to the reporters. And everyone had formed these opinions about Amanda. Amanda's behavioral actions come into play a lot, which I don't think is fair. We have always said that even if people are guilty, not guilty, you really can't judge someone's behavior in the aftermath of a tragedy because you can never understand how you will react until you are in something like that. It's not always sobbing, crying, begging for things to be better. Sometimes your body shuts down. Sometimes it presents itself as anger. You just cannot tell, but obviously people do, and the Italian media really took over with the behavior of Amanda after the murder of Meredith. They bring up that one of Meredith's friends said that she hoped that Meredith didn't suffer. Just like a blanket statement of like, I hope she wasn't like in pain when she passed. Hopefully like she didn't really feel anything, something like that. And Amanda just sort of like lost her mind. She's like, of course she suffered. She had her fucking throat cut. Like, can you not say things like that? Which, my house is so scary at night, guys. Anyway, which, like I get, grief presents sometimes itself as anger. She is on trial for something she didn't do. She's been in prison while this is going on. She can't understand what's happening to her. People are being assholes to her. So she just sort of like snapped. Like, of course she did. Can you please shut up? Like, we all know that she did. So the media has all they need about Meredith. Then they start digging into Amanda. And they find her MySpace. And on her MySpace is a picture of her holding this giant machine gun and laughing. Which, it isn't what it sounds like. She was at a museum with her family. She was like fake shooting this fake machine gun. Whatever. But also they found Raffaele's MySpace and it had a picture of him with a giant meat cleaver. So this is just not great for either of them. That like the media has located these 2 terrible pictures of them. And they're not like giving anyone the Benny of the D here. So they find this picture of Amanda, and instead of being like, I don't even know what they would say to make her nice because they were not trying to be nice at all, but they're framing it as like, look at this absolute psychopath. Raffaele was very shy, so the media really took off with the idea that like Amanda had gotten her hooks into the very inexperienced guy and roped him into like her whole mess. They were seen shopping for underwear the day after Meredith was murdered, and the shop owner said he heard them talking about having hot sex that night, which may or may or may not be a lie. You can't really trust these witnesses or like the preconceived notions about Amanda because of all of the lies the media had made up about her. They called Amanda she-devil, they called her the dominatrix, the man-eater, and they finally settled on Foxy Knoxy from her own MySpace, which is like the narrative that takes over. Also, Foxy Knoxy is an amazing nickname. I won't hear any Foxy Knoxy slander. And also, it isn't what it sounds like. I think it was like a nickname from when she played soccer as a child. So they're like taking this nickname and turning it into like she was calling herself like this sexy Foxy Knoxy, which is just like not the truth. So like I said, the Lumumba thing looked like Amanda was trying to divert the case away from her. Sort of like, why don't you look at this guy? She maintains that she was just so stressed. She had confessed that in the middle of the night, after hours and hours of being questioned and being told that she had met with Lumumba because her phone says she did, so she must be forgetting, which, like I said, we see false confessions because of coercion and environmental factors all the time. Please see the West Memphis 3. This is not that crazy of an idea that Amanda had confessed to something that she did not do after being in this room alone, no representation, outnumbered by 11 people, being told that she's a liar and being told that her phone shows her doing this, doing that, whatever. The prosecutor took this as Amanda couldn't stand being questioned and that she was like an anarchist and she's just like rebelling against this justice interrogation, whatever you want to call it. The prosecution also released photos of the bathroom with no explanation, and the images looked jarring. However, what they didn't disclose was the photos were taken after the bathroom had been completely sprayed with this pink chemical after they looked at the crime scene. So to the ill-informed eye, it looked like Amanda showered in a bathroom literally covered in blood. They obviously did not release the photos of the bathroom she showered in before they sprayed it down. If they had, it would have looked like maybe a nosebleed or someone like cut themselves shaving, because there was barely any blood there. But they wanted to make it seem like Amanda not only killed Meredith, but didn't care so much that she showered in an actual crime scene. And you should look up these pictures. The pink, if you like don't know what you're looking at, you could see it as red. And it is like, it looks like blood splatter, like spray everywhere. It looks like she like stabbed someone in their carotid artery in the bathroom and then showered in that exact bathroom. But it wasn't blood. It was a pink like luminol solution or something weird like that. But they didn't put any of that in there. They just released a photo of the bathroom to make it look like Amanda showered in a bathroom full of blood. Amanda was held in the Kapani prison and obviously underwent medical examination. And they took her blood and they told her that she had HIV and that she would get AIDS. She wrote this in her diary. She wrote that she was scared. She had wanted a family. Like, she didn't know what this meant for her future now. Because, what is this? I mean, by 2007, or when this took place, AIDS wasn't what it used to be in, like, the 80s, like, the panic of it. But there still is, like, a certain unknown. And that's just terrifying to hear that you have HIV. She listed all of her partners and whether they use protection. She's, like, trying to, like, backtrack, find out like either who she needs to tell or where she could have gotten this from. And obviously this diary is leaked. Nick Pisa obviously got it but won't reveal who leaked it because he's an asshole. So Foxy Knox's diary was in the front page headlines, and it turned out that she didn't even have HIV. It was just mind games being played on her, like, which is just insanity. But I think it's important to understand the level of games they were playing with her in the media. They are literally telling her that she has HIV. They're telling her she's HIV positive in this jail cell that she's spending all her time in alone. And then they're taking her diary where she's trying to process these feelings and releasing it to the public so they know everyone she has ever slept with. Also in her diary, which I must remind you, she was writing for herself. She was writing about how impossible that Meredith's DNA would have been on a knife that they found at Raffaele's house, because they like went through his knife drawer. I kind of did this out of order, but a lot of this was the order of the documentary. And as I was researching it, I was just inserting more information at the time that seemed most pertinent. They found like a knife at Raffaele's house that has Meredith's DNA on it and Amanda's DNA on it. So she's writing trying to process this feeling about how impossible that would have been. So then she writes this crazy hypothetical solution just to read how ridiculous this circumstance would have to be. She wrote that she would have had to fall asleep. Raffaele would have had to take the knife to their cottage, rape and kill Meredith with it, bring it home, have Amanda touch the handle while she was sleeping, clean up, and then get back in bed where he was when she woke up. So to me and to normal people that read, it's look how absolutely ridiculous it sounds. Look at the chain of events that would have had to happen for this to be real. To the media, when they got a hold of it, it seemed like Amanda was saying, I bet this is what happened. I bet this is how Raffaele killed Meredith. That's how it read to them. And they still hadn't found the actual knife, I should say, that Meredith was murdered with. So they searched Raffaele's home and found a knife that fit the profile, and the knife had both of their DNA on it. So that's where this comes from. It's not like they found this knife in the woods with blood on it or something. They just searched Raffaele's home and took one of his knives. They also found Meredith's bra clasp, and it had Raffaele's DNA on it. At this point, Raffaele claims that he had never been happier. So why would he have gone and murdered a girl when he just got a girlfriend for the first time ever? Which, true. He's I just met a hot American girl who was actively sleeping with me. I don't know why you think I would choose now to murder an innocent, different girl and ruin everything. He's also having his Lizzie McGuire summer. So then, with the media vilifying her and the prosecution benefiting off it, 2 weeks later, police say the forensic lab report came back and there was definitive proof that there was a third person present. So this whole time, the media is ripping her apart. They're Amanda Knox did this. She's a sex-crazed demon, dominatrix. She convinced Raffaele to murder something. They're all in on this crazy train. And then, all of a sudden, there is definitive proof that there was a third person present. There was the DNA in Meredith, the turd in the bathroom, and a ton of fingerprints around Meredith's body. And the DNA did not point to Amanda or Raffaele. They get a completely different hit on a man named Rudy Guetti. I just looked up how to say this, and I spelled it guide in my old notes, and I can't figure out if I was spelling it wrong or if I was spelling it how it sounded, so I could remember how to say it. Rudy Guetti, Guede. So they get a hit on this man, Rudy. He was a friend of the Italian men who lived right below Amanda and Meredith. Wow, would you look at that? Also, several bloody shoe prints were found throughout the cottage, which is why the idea of them bleaching the cottage seems so ridiculous, because why would there still be bloody footprints in there? Anyway, these footprints were consistent with a pair of Rudy's sneakers, including 2 in the kitchen, 2 in the corridor, 7 in Meredith's room, and 1 on the pillow found under her body are his bloody footprints. In his interview, he says he did meet Meredith the night before. He said he went there the night she was murdered, but they didn't hook up or anything because they didn't have a condom, and he went to the bathroom. When he was in the bathroom, he said he heard Meredith being attacked. He panicked and fled, and then said Amanda was not there that evening. However, at trial, he ends up backtracking and say he saw Amanda's silhouette outside the window. I'm sure the police had something to do with him admitting that. I'm sure they pushed him into something. Because when I say they wanted Amanda for this murder, they wanted her for this murder. It was the perfect story. It doesn't make Perugia look bad because Amanda wasn't from there. To them, it's just an insane sex-fueled murder. And they have a man's footprints, his DNA, and they're still trying to get information about Amanda out of him. Well, was Amanda there? No, dude. But he was there. Now, Rudy had been accused of several burglaries but was never convicted. He was arrested in Germany and confessed to being at the murder scene, but stated he was not the murderer. He maintains his innocence to this very day. Meredith's roommates, friends, and acquaintances all said they had never heard of Rudy before. They had never heard her talk about or hanging out with Rudy before. So it really did just not add up that he was saying they had met and they were being intimate with each other. It just didn't add up to them. However, the boys who lived in the downstairs unit, like I said, had hung out with Rudy occasionally, and Rudy had been seen hanging around there, which means he was familiar with the area, the cottage, the layout, and whatnot, because it was all in one building. So he's familiar with the layout. He could have broken in and known exactly where to go. However, like I said, the media literally did not care about this. He has literally confessed to being there, knowing Meredith, trying to hook up with her, And the media was like, okay, well, what about Foxy and Oxy? Like, we really don't care about Rudy when we have, like, a skanky American in the graphs for this crime. They're like, okay, but what about Amanda? Which is, like, the theme of this. So Rudy opted for a fast-track trial, which is common. He just, like, he had already confessed they had him. He didn't want to go through a whole trial and possibly get wrapped up in the Amanda and Raffaele mess, which in hindsight is kind of smart. You wouldn't want to tether yourself to those two. He had admitted so much, his lawyer said if he chose to be tried with them, it was extremely possible he would be found guilty of everything. So in October of 2008, almost a full year later, he was found guilty of the sexual assault and murder of Meredith Kircher. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, and he got it reduced to 16 years on appeal, which is crazy. Amanda and Raffaele chose to have a full trial, and they were also tried together. This is where the Italian media really ran away with the story that I had told you about, like the sex games. Also, the prosecutor from Perugia, Giuliano, really benefited from the reputation the media gave Amanda. I mean, half of his work is done. The Italian media has torn her apart. They gave her an awful reputation. You can't find someone who doesn't think Amanda was some type of sex-crazed dominatrix. For their trial, the prosecution sticks to the story that Amanda had Raffaele and Rudy over drinking, and Meredith got home and must have been upset with Amanda's actions and scolded her, which made Amanda mad, and saying that Raffaele and Rudy were just trying to please Amanda any way they could, so they murdered Meredith, which is, like, just insane. Like, they wanted to make Amanda so happy. They murdered her roommate who either scolded her or, like, didn't want to have sex with all of them. Like, things like that just don't happen. But they were 100% sure of Amanda, Raffaele, and Rudy's guilt. They were like, this is exactly what happened. It also should be noted that this is the exact same scenario they wove with Patrik Lumumba. And then when they found out that he wasn't there, they just kept the same story and instead inserted Rudy in there. Like, no big deal. They're, like, very set on the story. They don't care who was there as long as Amanda was there. And it was, like, some crazy sex crime. There were hundreds of people lining the street for this trial. The building was packed with cameras. You can see this. It is like wall-to-wall people watching this trial. On December 29th, 2009, Amanda was sentenced to 26 years in prison, and Raffaele was sentenced to 25 for the murder of Meredith. The prosecutor said people would shake his hand on the street and thank him, congratulate him, like he's like the goddamn president. People are just approaching him on the street like, thank you for your work. Thank you for getting Foxy and Oxy off the streets. Amanda really did have a lot of supporters, despite what we have said about how many people hated her, but it was mostly like all of the Americans. Because Amanda was a young, beautiful girl, this case took off and instantly became international news. The Americans claimed that the Italian legal system was severely antiquated and full of flaws, and they were discriminating against Amanda because she was foreign, which there are not many lies detected. I will very rarely admit that any white person is discriminated against, but in this case it probably was true. That was not working for her. So they get their sentencing in December of 2009. By April of 2010, their appeals are already filed, which is what's the word I'm looking for? Common that this happens. They do get an immediate appeal on this, contesting the evidence and the credibility of the witnesses presented. The appeal process did not begin until December of 2010, so 7 months after the filing. Keep in mind, Amanda has been in jail in a foreign country for over 3 years at this point because she was being held the entire time. I cannot imagine the mental toll that takes on a person. I mean, Raffaele has been in prison this whole time too, but he's familiar with the area. He's familiar with the language. He sort of like knows the runaround of this. Amanda knows nothing, and she's been here for 3 years. In this trial, forensic experts say that the DNA in the first case was unreliable. In June of 2011, the defense called a witness who did testify in court that Rudy had told him, while they were in prison, that Amanda and Raffaele were not involved. So that's the second time that Rudy has testified that Amanda and Raffaele were not involved in the murder of Meredith. He testified that he never saw him there. So, as for the unreliable DNA, an outside person was allowed to examine the evidence of the bra clasp and the knife. DNA traces are literally everywhere. A crime scene needs to be sterile, and this crime scene was not kept sterile, People were coming and going without protective suits. They rarely changed their gloves. The forensic expert described it as total chaos. The bra clasp that they had presented as like groundbreaking evidence with Raffaele's DNA on it was found under the rug after 46 days. 46 days it sat on the ground, and then they picked it up and tested it for DNA. That is so much time for DNA to be shuffled around. And actually, along with Raffaele's DNA, there were 2 other unaccounted DNA profiles on that small bra clasp that were never entered as evidence. DNA has to be exact. You cannot interpret it however you want. You can't just say his DNA is on there without entering the other DNA profiles into evidence. Like, it doesn't make sense. The profile on the knife of Amanda's DNA was a very good profile. They're like, this is certainly Amanda's DNA, which is not shocking because she spent a lot of time at Raffaele's house cooking in his kitchen. It's not that crazy to think her DNA would be on the dishes. But Meredith's DNA, it was so small, so scarce that it would have to be inconclusive. It literally could be, and most likely was, contamination, like from the other evidence with Meredith's DNA on it, rubbing on the knife because they were not careful. So now her DNA is on the knife. Like, they put it in a bag with like something else of hers. Now the DNA is on the knife, even though it wasn't before. Something like that. Also, like I said, this knife was not the murder weapon. Or like I should say, it was not found at the crime scene. This was just a knife that was at Raffaele's apartment with trace amounts of DNA on it. And I believe it was the first and only knife they took. So, what are the odds? You can see like his knife drawer and his utensil drawer. It's full. What are the odds that they pick up and test the one that has Meredith's DNA on it? They probably never had her DNA on it. It was probably cross-contamination. Also, after searching Raffaele's apartment, they did a luminol test and no trace of blood came up. Like, they did not take the knife back to his apartment and clean it off. There was no trace of any blood there ever. So there's no trace of Amanda in Meredith's room. No reliable trace of Raffaele in the room. No Meredith DNA on the knife. But they wouldn't stop talking about how weird Amanda acted and her behavior. Like I said, that she was a deviant. People even told the prosecutor that it could only be Rudy and him alone, but he did not think that was fair. So people are telling this man, like, I know you want this, but it literally can only be Rudy. I don't think anyone else was there. Amanda and Raffaele did have support from the Idaho Innocence Project, which is a legal organization that uses DNA to prove the innocence of wrongly convicted people. On October 3rd, 2011, so 2 years after the first trial, 4 years since the murder, Amanda and Raffaele's convictions were overturned. The people in the streets of Italy were not feeling that. They were very pissed. Amanda did have a separate case for defaming Lumumba, which was upheld, and she had to pay a fine and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, which I think they just counted as time served because she had been there the whole time. Because as they read the verdict, she started sobbing in court and immediately flew home to Seattle after that. She said, good fucking bye. Which I am known to talk occasional, frequent shit about America, but if I was just hunted down by Italian police and kept in prison for 4 years while they tried anything to keep me there and make up shit, I too would flee the country as soon as I legally could. Now there's, what do they call it, extradition. Now there's things you gotta do to get me back there. So good fucking luck. So Amanda gets home. She gets right back to school at the University of Washington, which is just so crazy to me that she immediately jumped back into school. But also, I get it. She's wanted to get back to normal. That could not be me. I'll use any excuse to not go to work or school, especially if I had just spent half a decade in an Italian prison. But I also have never spent half a decade in a foreign prison for something I didn't do. So maybe I would be kissing the soil that UT sat on. Who knows? When she returned home, the American media went off, following her, saying, what does she do now? Do you go back to normal? Do you use your new fame to go on Dancing with the Stars? Once they figure out what she's going to do, they can see where, their head's at. Did you do it? Did you not do it? Are you guilty? Do you feel bad? They were all over her. They were interviewing her father outside of his home about what movie offers they've gotten, and her dad is that's, not really what we're focusing on. And the interviewer was like, well, the longer you wait, the less money you're going to get for things like this, right? In terms of an interview, she's not going to be such hot property in a month. And her dad was like, okay, well, I'm not looking at her as hot property. The whole world, like I said, knew who she had sex with from her diary. She was apparently the sex-obsessed whore. She had a hard time adapting. She was not the same person when she left, which obviously it cannot be stated enough the portrait they painted of her, revealing pictures of her on the front page of all the papers, bold, Foxy Noxy in every paper you could see. She entered this country a very quiet girl who wanted to come out of her shell a little bit, and she left thinking, like, maybe the shell isn't that bad, because they made me look like something I had never been before. She had interviews with people like Diane Sawyer telling her she doesn't look like she's grieving, she doesn't look like the picture of grief, asking her if she's into deviant sex, if she did experimenting in Italy, things like that. Just, I'm sure it was a relief to be home, and then she had to deal with our media, which also isn't great. However, in 2013, Amanda and Raffaele were ordered to stand trial for Meredith's murder by the Italian Supreme Court. So, like, I'm assuming someone filed an appeal similar to, like, our Supreme Court. Italy's final court of appeal, the Court of Cassation, had overturned their acquittals. So they are no longer acquitted of this crime. The final guilty verdict focuses on circumstantial evidence and Amanda's behavior. Meredith's family actually did want Amanda arrested back in Italy. They thought she did it, which is always so sad. Amanda released a statement shortly after learning that she would again face trial for Meredith's murder. She said, "It was painful to receive the news that the Italian Supreme Court decided to send my case back for revision when the prosecution's theory of my involvement in Meredith's murder has been repeatedly revealed to be completely unfounded and unfair." She stated, adding, "I believe that any questions as to my innocence must be examined by an objective investigation and a capable prosecution. The prosecution responsible for the many discrepancies in their work must be made to answer for them, for Raffaele's sake, my sake, and most especially for the sake of Meredith's family. Our hearts go out to them." The new trial began September 30th, 2013 in Florence, Italy, with Judge Alessandro Nancini. I never know, like, the C-I sound in Italian. It's N-E-N-C-I-N-I. Amanda did not return to be present for the trial because she did not have to. However, Raffaele attended the trial as the verdict was handed out. So she did not have to go back, but Raffaele obviously lives there, so he was there willingly. The whole thing sort of revolved around a new piece of evidence that they called 36I. This evidence was a very small piece of material found on a knife they believed was the murder weapon in the kitchen of the apartment. New testing on the knife did not find Meredith's DNA, but they did find traces of Amanda's on the handle. Amanda's defense team used this in what they believed was their favor. They're basically like, okay, this just means Amanda used the knife for cooking and put it back. Like, it's insane to try someone for murder over a small trace of DNA on a knife in their own home. Why would she murder Meredith and then just plainly put the knife back in the drawer? They're like, we can use this because if you think about what they're saying, it doesn't make sense. However, in February of 2014, Amanda and Raffaele were found guilty of the murder of Meredith Kircher after nearly 12 hours of deliberation by an appeals court jury that concluded the upholding of the 2009 decision when they were found guilty the first time. And 12 hours is not that long of a deliberation. We have seen some long ones. We have seen shorter ones. This would be one where I would be genuinely curious what they were going to say when they came back. Like, you see juries deliberate for 2 hours and you know they're coming back and they're saying guilty. The Casey Anthony jury deliberated for 2 days. You know they're thinking that she may have not done that. But 12 hours it's not that long, but it's long enough for you're like, what are they possibly looking at? Amanda received 28.5 years in prison and Raffaele received 25 years. Keep in mind, Amanda is like 26 now. She was 20 when this started. Almost all of her 20s have been eaten up in a murder trial. Amanda wrote of the verdict, "I am frightened and saddened by this unjust verdict. Having been found innocent before, I expected better from the Italian justice system. The evidence and accusatory theory do not justify a verdict of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. There has always been a marked lack of evidence. This has gotten out of hand. Most troubling is that it was entirely preventable. I beseech those with the knowledge and authority to address and remediate the problems that worked to pervert the course of justice and waste the valuable resources of the system." In March of 2015, the Supreme Court overturned the 2014 convictions in what was finally the final ruling in the case against Amanda and Raffaele. They were exonerated because the court blamed stunning flaws in the investigation and the increased media attention for creating a frantic search for guilty parties, and the justices find a complete lack of biological traces connected to Amanda and Raffaele. The court says evidence still points to Rudy being guilty. Amanda issued a statement after the verdict was read, stating she was tremendously relieved and grateful. After she got home, she began working as a freelance journalist. She wrote a memoir called Waiting to be Heard that was released in 2013. Her Netflix documentary Knox was released in 2016. She also appears at events for the Innocence Project. She was briefly engaged to a childhood friend in 2015, but they broke up in 2018. She got engaged to a man named Christopher Robinson. Pisa said he didn't buy the trial by media thing, and he just blames the police for a botched investigation. He then said, looking back, a lot of the stuff printed was just not true, but what was he supposed to do? Like, everyone was just trying to get something out before their competitor, so sure, he said some things that were lies, but someone was going to say them, so he wanted to be the first one to say them, which I do believe trial by media was a large part of this case. I mean, these juries, there's no way they were unbiased. All you could read was how terrible of a person Amanda was, how she had HIV, how she slept with all these people, in a handwritten diary that she wrote about all these people. Trial by media is real. Rudy maintained his innocence the entire time. Raffaele runs his own internet company in Bari, Italy, and serves as a true crime expert for Italian TV. Patrik Lumumba really suffered from the false accusations. He lost his bar. He now lives with his wife in Poland. He says Amanda was only acquitted because she was rich and American and it looked bad on Italy, so he was harboring some ill will. In January of 2019, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Italy owed Amanda the equivalent of $20,000 American dollars for the failure to provide legal assistance and an interpreter during her initial interrogation immediately after the murder, which I would argue for more money, just based on everything she went through. In November of 2021, Rudy was released from prison after serving 13 of his 16 years. A judge in the Italian town of Viterbo agreed to further reduce his sentence, which had been due to end on January 4th, 2022, by an additional 45 days due to good behavior. Francesco Maresca, the lawyer representing the Kircher family, said that while it was normal for sentences to be reduced, maybe a moral reflection was warranted over whether such a low sentence could be sufficient for a murder of this kind, which is true. Responding to Rudy's release, Raffaele Solicito told the news agency, Amanda and I risked conviction for something we didn't do because of his lies. I'm just sorry that he has never regretted what he did, killing that poor girl. And that is how the trial of a century, the trial of Amanda Knox, went down in Italy. I can't imagine the panic of getting like multiple phone calls after you're innocent that you're actually guilty again. Like the fear of having to go back to an Italian prison after being home and found innocent would be terrible. It makes me want to throw up just thinking about it. I think she wrote another book, and I think before that she went back to Perugia, which is nuts. It reminds me of when Natalie Holloway's mom went back to Aruba. She did meet up with Raffaele when she was there. There should be a picture of it when I post the Instagram for this week. Raffaele has since also married someone else, so they're just living their lives. But the majority of their 20s was spent in an Italian prison, being put on trial after trial after trial for a murder that they probably had nothing to do with. I don't buy that they had anything to do with it. I just think logistically it doesn't make sense, the reasonings they were giving. I mean, Raffaele said it himself. It was the happiest he had ever been. He had a hot American girlfriend. To Amanda, she had like this hot local Italian boyfriend. It just doesn't make sense that they would like blow up their entire lives for essentially nothing. I can't see any reason they would have done that. I think Rudy makes the most sense. It was his actual DNA was everywhere, and he had been like convicted of crimes before. He had admitted to it. I think it was Rudy and Rudy alone. But I would be interested to hear what you think. If you think they're also innocent, or if you don't think they're innocent, I'd be interested to know why. And I'm sure the documentary was a little biased, even though they did include like some terrible things about her. They tried to include both sides. It was called Knox, though, and it did have Amanda in it, so there is like a certain air of bias to it. But I did go through some new, why do I keep wanting to use the word sources? Could think of the word. I did read up on it again before I did it, and I don't see any reason why Amanda would have done that. But let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed this two-parter. If you haven't already, please send me your suggestions for another long episode so I can get a nice batch loaded for you before I get my tonsil surgery. And I will see you on Friday if you are a subscriber. And if you're not, that is A-okay. I will see you on Wednesday. And thank you very much for sticking around. Bye.